Welcome to the Q&A follow-up to our Ardenwood Presents 3-month webinar series on the timeless blessings of planned giving. Today is your chance to ask questions about long-term care for Christian Scientists. I'm John Mitchell, and I serve as Executive Director and CEO of Ardenwood here in San Francisco. We thank you for joining us today. You know, one question several people have asked that I'd like to answer before we begin is this: why is long-term care part of estate planning? The short answer is because Christian Scientists make informed personal decisions in order not to be a burden to their families, not physically and not financially. Estate planning is an invitation to consider all aspects of life, from care for yourself to care for your family, to care for the causes you love. Good estate planning includes informed considerations of care options, and that includes long-term care. Finally, the content shared today is only informational and is not intended to be legal advice. And now, let me reintroduce Jim Maher, Katie Burris, and Rick Bailey, who are here with me to answer your questions. Jim Maher is a certified senior advisor and a broker consultant specializing in Medicare. He is also a certified long-term care insurance strategist. Jim has talked to more than 1,200 Christian Scientists since we began these informational webinars, answering innumerable questions about Medicare, long-term care insurance, and estate planning. He's been a tremendous blessing to our field. And from what he's told me, he has loved meeting and working with all of you. Katie Burris is a Medicare specialist and certified long-term care consultant, helping individuals with their Medicare and long-term care planning strategies. Katie is a partner at McGrew & Maher Insurance Services and has been in the business for 17 years now. She's licensed for life insurance, long-term care, and Medicare in several states. Rick Bailey is the founder and chairman of CAMUS, and is one of the most highly renowned estate planners in the United States. He's a certified financial planner, or CFP, with a master's degree in accountancy and taxation, as well as a Juris Doctorate, or JD. Think lawyer. Rick Bailey works with private clients, CPAs, attorneys, financial advisors, and life insurance professionals. In other words, he's happy to work with you. Just a reminder, you can submit questions using the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And now, let's begin. I'll ask the first question. You mentioned annuities at Tuesday's presentation. I have one now, but I'm not sure it's the right kind and with long-term care coverage. How would I know? Would it be worth changing? I'm not sure I totally understand the benefits you explained. Please help.
Yeah, that's a good question. Rick, we talked about a couple annuities the other day, and one of them was that Global Atlantic annuity. And it's kind of interesting, John. It's a unique annuity where it really focuses in on long-term care coverage. The basic concept is somebody puts in a dollar, right? And then instead of getting $2 for long-term care coverage, they can get $3 if they can answer all the health questions no. Well, so far, the only ones I've seen answer all the questions no are any Christian Scientists we've dealt with, quite honestly. So I just say the $1 and the $3, but if you put zeros, realistically, the example we used in the presentation, I think, was $150,000 this lady put into the annuity. And she got $450,000 right off the bat in long-term care. So Rick, we put an inflation rider on there, and we were looking at age 90, that $150,000 turned into over almost $950,000 of long-term care coverage. So that's a lot of leverage, right? We talked about leverage and turning 150 into almost $1 million when you're probably going to claim. As most Christian Scientists live a very long and meaningful and healthy lifestyle. And if somebody has an annuity now, it's absolutely worth looking at changing. Rick knows the tax codes better than I do. Rick, the 1035 tax-free exchange, Rick can probably explain that better than I can. But it's something, if you've got money sitting there and you don't, a lot of people have annuities and they don't intend on ever using it, right? It's kind of safe money and it's tax deferred. So Rick, IRS rights, is that the right code, 1035 exchange?
1035, correct.
Okay, that allows us to take an older policy into a newer policy. There's no gain, right? You carry that basis, everything over into the new policy. And all the benefits you receive now would be tax-free for long-term care. So
I think one thing to add to that, Jim, is anytime that we review any client that we work with, we review what you have. And if it's the best thing for you, we're going to pat you on the back and tell you good job. If there's something better, we want to show it to you.
That's right. Yeah, it's interesting, Rick, you say that, because I've had a couple Christian Scientists I've talked to that have actually had that annuity and didn't realize they've had it. I'm like, well, you have it. And they said, well, we didn't know that. And, right. So you're exactly right. Yeah, absolutely. If you've got something you should keep, we absolutely tell you to keep it. So,
yep.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Next up, I live in South Carolina. Can you help me here? I live alone and my children live on the West Coast. What do I need to do to find the right long-term care plan?
So we are licensed in South Carolina. We do find it really common, especially when your adult children live far away, that especially a long-term care policy is good to look at, because you don't have them there for that hands-on care, even if they could or they would do that. Yes, we can absolutely look at that. We would want to just talk over your situation. So we always send out a questionnaire to get more information about you and your entire situation before we would make any sort of recommendation.
right. It's interesting, South Carolina. We've been getting a lot of calls from North Carolina, South Carolina, right? So it seems like quite a few Christian Scientists back there. But Katie's absolutely right. John, you said it best when you said most of these people, they don't want to be a burden, right? I don't want to be a burden to my children. That's why I took my plan out like 20 some years ago. But I found out the underlying theme, it seems like. I don't want to be a burden to anyone. I want to be able to take care of myself or not bother my children or grandchildren.
Yeah, and ensure your type of care, your choice of care.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Cool. Okay, next up. You keep talking about life insurance plans. My husband, who is 69, has a whole life plan that he's had for more than 30 years. Can he use this for our long-term care? You talked about an example of someone using their insurance policy and putting it into a new plan with long-term care benefits. Can you elaborate on that and explain the tax benefits? You kind of touched on it earlier, but yeah,
right.
Go ahead.
That would be anything with tax. That's kind of a right.
I think it does go back to the previous question. Is we can update annuities, life insurance to the newer policies. The tax code allows us to do that with the tax-free transfer. There again, your current policy could be great, could be exactly what you need, and doing a review of that. Well, if it's what you need, let us show you how best to use it. If we can improve on it, and my last call just before I got on here was this exact scenario. They have two other policies, and we talked through, why do you have them? What are the uses for them? One of the policies going to go to charity, one's going to take care of the kids. Then we talked about, what about you? What about your long-term care needs? And that's something that they just hadn't even thought about. So when you talk about, can the current whole life policy work? The answer is maybe. Is it the best one for you? Is changing it and updating it? One of the examples I always like using is a cell phone. Think about that original cell phone that came out. It was a brick that honestly, I saw one, it's a brick with a phone cord that comes out and you put it up to your ear. Well, none of us would have carried that around. But now we all have one in our pocket, no matter where we go. All the new benefits, all the new features. If it's better to change to those new benefits and features, let's look at it.
Right.
Let's see if it's a fit for you. And if so, let's update. But there's got to be a reason to update, and it's got to be in your best interest, not let's update it just because we can.
Yeah. It's interesting, Rick.
Right.
We had a client come in and they had a couple old policies, and one, the value, believe it or not, was $153,000, because I remember that. And he goes, well, I think maybe I'll just cash it in. It's really not doing much. And so we showed him how to move that into an asset-based long-term care, right? Life insurance. And he even wanted, I remember he wanted to make it $175,000 even, because he wanted to get up to, it was almost, I don't know, 700,000 or 800,000 by the time he's 90, but it accomplished that. And he realized too, that gain, there's no gain, right? It goes into the policy. And when you take those benefits out, that taxable gain now becomes a tax-free benefit. So it's kind of he goes, I'm not going to use it. Well, now it's there for care, and you're going to get 4 or 5 times what you had sitting there, and you never have to worry about it. It's there, it's guaranteed, it's contractual. So, and like you said, you're not paying tax on it.
Yeah, and it improves the picture.
Exactly.
We're always looking at how do we improve it based on your goals, whether
the picture, yeah.
Whether it's improve it for you, improve it for your kids, improve it for the charities, it's all based off of you and your goals, and let's get the best fit for you.
That's right.
That's awesome. Next up, is it advisable to take money out of my IRA rollover for long-term care? I have no annuity or life insurance.
I think that's the tax question. So back to here's the reality of it, and I see this. People have built up large pensions, they have large IRAs. At some point, required minimums or distributions are going to kick in. All of that comes into the fact that when you take money out of that IRA, it's going to be taxable. Mm-hmm. Now the question is, what do you do with it? Yeah, and I can tell you what I see most people do is they take that money out, they put it into another investment that's taxable, and just create more tax that they, on income they may or may not need. And if you don't need it, let's look at repositioning that into tax-free during your life. It's also, if you need long-term care, we can create tax-free benefits there. So it's just, can we do, put more money into your pocket, more money to your kids, however you want it to go. But we've got to look at what the taxes are going to drain away from you and what you're trying to accomplish.
That's right. Yeah, over the years, Rick, I mean, we did one last year where the individual had a pretty good sum of over $1 million in their 401k. I think the first year, I can't remember, it's like 3.4 or 3.5% they had to pull out. So we created a long-term care, right, of 5-pay with that money going in over 5 years. He was comfortable. He didn't need that to live on. So that's an example of sooner or later, government take out of the left pocket instead of putting it in your right pocket. This time we said, let's give it to the insurance company and triple or quadruple that money if we need it for care. So I like that idea a lot. I think it makes sense. But
I like think about it as buckets of money. What are you using those buckets for? Right. If you've got a bucket that's set up for retirement, that's income you need in retirement. Mm-hmm. Well, that can be in a pension, it could be in annuities, qualified plans, whatever. So that money's going to come out, it's going to be taxable. Then I see other, the next investments are things that are, investments that you make that may be taxed now or taxed later or can be passed on. But I'll tell you, the bucket most everybody jumps over is tax-free.
Right. And
you can create tax-free with life insurance. You can create it with these long-term care policies, Roth IRAs. There's things that we can do there, and creating that tax-free bucket. So you've got more use of your money when and if you need it.
Right. Totally agree. Like tax-free.
Yeah.
I love this discussion, navigating through and getting the most benefit for your hard-earned money. I mean, avoiding some of these taxes that you don't have to pay.
That's right.
By having a plan. It's just brilliant.
You work your entire life, you put all that money away, sooner or later the government says, listen, we want some of it back, right? And even when you eventually pass, right, they're still going to take that. So why not turn it into that tax-free bucket, Rick? I really like that. Yeah. Good concept.
Just brilliant. Okay, next up. I purchased a Mutual of Omaha long-term care plan with a Christian Science rider. Do you know if it's still active on my plan? I have looked through my policy and I don't see anything about a Christian Science rider, but I know they told me that when I got this policy years ago.
Okay, I've had quite a few discussions with Christian Scientists throughout the country on this particular one. It seems like a lot of policies are, Mutual of Omaha, first off, it's a fine company, really strong, financially solvent company, good people. Policies are solid, but sometimes people think they bought a policy that had a particular rider on there. And we looked at the policy and it's nowhere in the contract, Rick. So I've told them if it's not in the contract, it doesn't, you don't have that rider. And some of them, quite honestly, John, I think sometimes people were sold policies that were maybe in the best interest of the agent, quite honestly.
Sure.
And I feel bad because I know Mutual of Omaha does have policies with long-term care riders for Christian Scientists on there.
They do, because we've seen.
Yeah, we've seen it, and then some people have sent us ones, and we, first off, I'd say send us it or take a copy of the first few pages so we can see. It doesn't matter what the agent or what the illustration they left behind says. Right, Rick? It's what's in that contract.
Yep.
Yep. It counts.
Yeah, and I think that's the best answer is just, make a copy, send it over, let us get our eyes on it. There again, we want to make sure it's what you thought you had, and if it's not, can we improve on it?
That's exactly right.
Let's look at it.
Okay.
Great. Next up, I'm 72, live alone in Oregon, and I'm in very good health. My daughter lives in Southern California. I'm curious why long-term care is mentioned with legacy planning. I do have assets and plan on using them for long-term care if I ever need them. Is there a reason I should purchase one of these annuities or life insurance plans you were talking about?
Rick's the legacy guy.
I anytime I get into the legacy planning, I have to say there's competing goals. I don't care how much money you have or how little money you have, it doesn't matter. It's how can we best achieve your goals? And remember, there's always somebody nipping at your heels, and it's called Uncle Sam. And it's going to be, are there income taxes? Are there estate taxes? If you're in Oregon, you've got a state estate tax that kicks in or at a very low amount. So you start looking at all those competing goals and how best can we cover them. So when we talk about leverage, we're always trying to look at how best to pay for it. Yes, it sounds like you've got the assets to pay for your own care. Is that the best way to pay for your care? Or can we take a percentage of that and put it into the long-term care policy? And that money that we save now, we can pass on to your daughter. You can pass it on to a charity. You can do things with that extra money that you couldn't have done before. So we're always just looking at how best to cover as many goals as we can and create the best plan so that it's the less being drained off the taxes, money that's, repositioned the right way is just going to help you achieve the goals better and faster.
Right. I think in the presentation, Rick, we had a slide where it shows that puzzle piece, right? The long-term care is part of that package, your legacy planning. So I'm guessing that's where I think sometimes people go, well, gee, I don't really have an estate, or do I really have a legacy? Is it part of legacy planning? I think sometimes they think maybe that doesn't apply to them, right? So.
Yeah, and it really applies to everybody. When I look at legacy planning, and I like the term legacy planning versus estate planning, because legacy planning applies to everybody. What do you want to pass on to others? If you think about it, we're all going to pass on. Mm-hmm. At that point in life, what do we want to pass on and to who?
Right.
There again, it's not how much. It's what you have and what do you want to do with it, and how best can we achieve your goals. And And I've worked with all sorts of net worths, from low to high. And there's always a competing goal there. So we want to make sure we take care of you during your life.
Mhm.
And then as soon as you expire, where does that go and how does it go?
Right.
And if we can do a better job taking care of you during life, repositioning some of where those assets are, we're just going to check off more boxes that you care about.
Right.
And I'll tell you, it's interesting. I'll go back to that last meeting that I was in. It was interesting. I've now had 4 conversations with them. Today's the first time they mentioned wanting to give money to charity at their passing. And I don't think they overlooked it. They just hadn't quite disclosed it or come to grips with it.
Right.
And now that we know that, we can figure out what's the best way to do that.
Right. I totally agree. I
That's
think
neat.
like even the long-term care planning allows people, like the example of the life insurance policy, right? The 153 and he puts in more, the 175. That takes care of his what if something happens to me. So other monies now he can focus on, like everybody's telling me it's family and charities for most people.
Mhm.
Right? It's for most people. But it's kind of like, well, now you have more money to do that. You can actually give money while you're still living instead of waiting till you pass, right? So you can actually see that money do good right now. So I really like that. I think tell people it's got to give you peace of mind knowing that's taking care of the what if. So you don't have to worry about what if my 401k is now my 201k and I have to use more of that money for care and I don't want to. It's done. It's guaranteed. It allows you to help more people now and pass other monies to your family.
Or like what you're going to do with your father's apartment building.
Well, that's right. Yeah, yeah. No, I was talking about Rick when my father needed care. My mom ironically had a long-term care policy, but my dad, we had to sell. He had a little fourplex apartment building he built in San Jose years ago, back in the 50s. And of course, we had to liquidate it. The only time commercial property went down in San Jose was in 2008. Guess when we needed the money for dad, right? It was seriously, and we had to sell it. And we knew it was worth more, but we needed the money to take care of my father. Well, it was his money, right on class. My sister didn't think so, by the way, but it was his money. And yeah, if he would have had the policy, ironically enough, he goes, "Yeah, I guess I should have been the one to get the policy, not mom." And I go, "Well, too late. Tough to get 100, Dad." So
that's really what it comes in. When you're looking at those types of things. It's what assets are you going to sell when that long-term care need comes up. You don't have a choice. Do I pay the bill or not?
Right.
It's we have to liquidate. We have to create money. Now I'll give you a flip side of that. Something that I really enjoyed working on about a year ago. We helped an individual. We restructured how she was holding things. She got a long-term care policy, got things in order so she knew she was taken care of. And then she felt comfortable. She started gifting money to her grandkids, helping them with education, helping them, get started in life. So all of a sudden, since she felt she could start doing that, she got to see what her money could do now.
That's great, right? While you're alive, where you can, I think that's
Awesome.
Versus I've got to hold on to it every dime just in case.
Right.
We want to, address those what ifs.
Mm-hmm.
But make sure, if we can leverage, and there again, back to the term leverage, can we better use those dollars?
Right.
And it's the peace of mind too, knowing that it's taken care
It's
of.
done.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, truly. Next up, my wife and I have a trust and significant assets. We live in Colorado. We have 3 children, 5 grandchildren, and do not want to be a burden to any of them. You mentioned self-funding and the insurance option. I believe you used an example of someone with $1 million. Can you explain that again, please?
Yeah, I was talking about had a particular client, and he had, he was pretty wealthy. And so we were talking about Medicare, and one thing led to another about a long-term care. And he says, "Well, Jim, I've taken care of that. I'm giving my broker another $1 million. right? And he's going to take care of that's our long-term care plan for myself and my wife. And Rick, what I told him, I said, listen, why don't you let me look? And I knew in the numbers, I said, if you give me half of that, 500,000, I can put in, I think it was, what we did?
3 for the wife, 2 for
Three
him.
for a wife and 2 for him. And it contractually guaranteed that at age 85, they would have like $1.1 million each, guaranteed. And so he liked, he's a pretty astute guy. So he looks at that and he goes, well, why wouldn't I want to do that? And he goes, then I have 500,000. Then I can go be aggressive in the market. And I asked him how I talked to him not too long ago. How good is it being aggressive in the market? And he goes, I'm glad I did the planning, right? Yeah, because so the point being, you don't have to have $1 million, but he did. So that's a real life example. But it doesn't matter what you have. You should look at other options. I think putting money in a brokerage account for long-term care may not be the most prudent idea, or putting it in a CD that's paying minus 0% or something is probably not a great plan either.
You don't really know what that account is going to be worth when you need it.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Exactly.
that's a real life example. Doesn't always work that way, but in that case, I thought it really helped them out.
No, and I think that goes back to that whole leverage. I mean, if you think about leverage, it's just, can we do better? Can we create options that are better? And, if we can get peace of mind that long-term care is covered, great. Now let's go do other things. Now, might not be go play the stock market, but it could be,
Right.
gifting, charity, helping the whatever it is, it's more.
Right.
We're able to do, you are able to do more of what you want to do with your money.
Right.
Knowing with, like Katie said, peace of mind that what if of long-term care is taken care of.
Right.
Love that. Great. I live alone and worry about who would take care of me if I didn't stay at Ardenwood. Can I use any of these long-term care policies at Ardenwood? Would you recommend I try and get one? I have 2 annuities now and one I get monthly income from. Would that continue to pay at Ardenwood?
And I get a lot of questions, Sean. People absolutely love Ardenwood, right? I talk to all over. There are people from all over the United States, and that's one of their goals is to stay at your place in Ardenwood. So
Very cool.
The answer is on the long-term care plan, it really depends what kind. We know, John, you probably explain it better than I would, but yours is an accredited facility, right? But insurance companies look at a licensed facility. And I know that there's a difference, and you probably explain that better than I do. But if you have, like, for example, we were using the nationwide long-term care plan, asset-based long-term care, because it pays a cash benefit. Once you receive that cash benefit, I can take a trip. I can have my grandson pay for his education. I can use those monies at Ardenwood. I can do whatever I want with those monies. So you have to make sure you have the right type of policy. Most of the annuities, I think that's what she asked about. She had an annuity and payout that would continue to pay out, right? Which she could use to stay at Ardenwood, right? That's money like Social Security check coming in every month for the rest of her life coming in. And what was the other?
An annuity that you're getting a payout on and you're living on, and that is paying your expenses, is never one that we would recommend then moving to cover long-term care.
Right.
No.
Right.
Yeah, and now I'll add to that one. I just saw this. I was just reviewing a situation last week, and she's taking money from 2 annuities. However, nobody walked her through how best to do that. And so looking at it, what really is going to work best for her is take all of her money from one annuity, because it was an annuity set up for income. And I'll just say a phenomenal annuity. Don't touch it. The other annuity, she could turn off the income from that, because if she's taking it from annuity 1, great. It was more than what she needed. Annuity 2 could be repositioned into a long-term care annuity. So it's one there again, just we've got to look at the situation to see what's best. But Katie nailed it. We don't want to upset your current income if that's what you're living on.
Right.
I think people are confused sometimes that annuities have different goals. So people just think of annuities as one type of product, but Annuities, some you're using for income, some you're using for long-term care. So they're a really cool vehicle that you can use to do different things with.
That's right. They're a vehicle, right? It's a vehicle. It's a
Yeah. Well, I if you think about it, it's like saying an annuity is like saying you have a car.
right.
What kind of car is, unless you go on the lot and look at the sticker in the window, you don't know what that car does. Right. Same thing with an annuity. Unless you look at the contract, you don't know what that annuity has been set to and designed for. So it could be a great annuity with the wrong goal.
Right.
Or you can have an idea, this is what this annuity is going to do, and it won't fit what you're trying to do. So it's really fit it to you and make sure you know how to use it.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay. I listened to your long-term care presentation last year. I'm now ready to talk with you. Yay! That wasn't in there, by the way.
That's good.
That was me. I live in the Bay Area. I would want to make sure the policy is good at Ardenwood. I'm very healthy, but somewhat concerned about the cost of a policy. What is the best way to move forward on this?
Probably the best way is just to contact us so we can talk to you, find out if it's something that you want, you need, you qualify for, and make sure it fits your budget. And make sure we have the right type of policy, especially if you want to go into Ardenwood. So we've got, I think they're showing our contact information up there, so you can absolutely just shoot us an email or a call, and we're happy to go through that just to make sure if it makes sense to you.
It's really about asking good questions, isn't it? In terms of you ask good questions, they are presenting their situation and just kind of getting to, as Rick says, what's your plan? What's your strategy? How are we going to go about this? That's great. Great. Next up, why do you keep talking about life insurance and leverage? I don't have a policy, but I do have a nest egg. I'm healthy and I take very good care of myself. I want to leave my money to my adult children and a few charities. Can you please explain the leverage part again?
The leverage is easy. Can we turn $1 into $4? That's really what we're after. And when it comes back to how we always look at it, it's figure out what you have, figure out what your goals are, and how best to achieve it. And if I look at it, let's say you have 3 kids and you want to leave them each $1 million. How best to leave them $1 million or $100,000 or $10? You can either hand them the money out of your wallet, or you can use a life insurance contract to take that money out of your wallet and turn it into more. And that's all we're looking at is can we create more dollars for you to use how you want to. And we always know there's a limited amount of money. Everybody has a limited amount of money, and they have numerous goals. How can we best check off as many goals as possible and leverage? If we can give $1 to an insurance company and they can turn it into 2, 3, or 4, that's leverage. And then just put the zeros behind it.
Yeah, I think for some people, this is such a new idea. They think it sounds shady, or It's not. This is what a lot of people do. A lot of smart business people and wise people do. There are options out there, and that's why we're giving these seminars to say, what are your options? Rather than to say, well, I've saved really well. Well, you have, but there's a way to really leverage that to have it benefit you and your charities or loved ones so much more.
Well,
like Rick talked about when he met with the clients, and it wasn't until the 3rd or 4th meeting that they talked about, we want to give money to charities. We find that so often when we talk to individuals about long-term care, and we ask them, well, what if you needed care, what do you want to happen? And they go, we never thought about that. Right. And so it's just something that people think, I'll deal with that eventually. I'll deal with that when it comes. And it's just doing pre-planning so that you are in control if and when something were to happen.
That's the key. You are in control, right?
It's determining your destiny in terms of how this, and again, that sense of not being a burden to anyone. and getting your choice of care. What kind of care do you want in your heart?
That's right.
Great. Okay, next up, my good friend had a long-term care policy that covered care she received at home. Are there policies that cover that? You mentioned home care and cooking and cleaning, driving one to appointments, etc. Is the cost prohibitive at my age of 74?
So yes, there are, and most policies do cover you for home care. It's very common that we see that that's where care starts. So when people think long-term care, a lot of people think going into Ardenwood or going into, a facility or somewhere where they have to move to, but most care starts at home. And so the long-term care policies do help pay with those, we call them the instrumental activities of daily living, the chores, so to speak, that have to happen on a daily basis.
Yeah. And they do. And this new company we found, the NGL Life Company, they're very good at that. They have shorter duration policies where somebody, even at that age, they go up to age 79, for example, they can buy a 2-year plan. A 2-year plan or a 1-year plan is better than no plan. Right? Everybody wants to stay home, and that allows people to stay home by using the insurance company's money and not theirs, because it gets pretty expensive. So that's another situation. You look at that and determine, hey, is it worth it or not? And if it's too expensive and it doesn't make sense, and we say don't do it. But on the other hand, most people are looking for something that allows them to stay home where they're not a burden to their children, or we've found a lot of siblings or their sisters or somebody coming in to take care of them. So yeah, you should absolutely check it out. 74, and if you're healthy. And John, that's the key. When we work with Christian Scientists, you have the most important thing to purchase a policy. It's not the money, right? The money pays for it. It's your health. Most non-Christian Scientists, Rick, as we know, right, are not as healthy. They're just not. And they can't answer no to most health questions. So you already have one leg up on most people by saying you're incredibly healthy. God's blessed you with incredible health, and you continue that. And that's the time when you want to get it, not when something happens and you call and go, this just happened, can I get this? And the answer is always not anymore, not anymore. So.
Right, that planning ahead.
Yep.
I have a long-term care policy with CalPERS. Can you tell us what CalPERS is again quickly?
Right, that's the California, that's the
pension for California state workers.
And they also have, other benefits in there aside from the pension. They have long-term care, and it's taken quite a beating over the last 20 years or so. I think they've had, Rick, 12 to 13 rate increases in California. So,
yeah.
Right.
It's been something.
And they'll continue to have them. They send out letters. Oh, John, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't let you.
Yeah, no, exactly. But I just want people to know what CalPERS is. Yeah. Okay. I have a long-term care policy with CalPERS. Is that still a good one? I guess that kind of leads into where you were going. Right. Is that still a good one? I have had rate increases and received correspondence from them showing future rate increases.
Right.
I'm not sure if I should keep the policy or not. I don't believe that it has any Christian Science riders. No. Would I be better off canceling that plan? I've paid into it for over 20 years.
Right. We've seen a lot in those last year. CalPERS, they had a big lawsuit, and they offered a buyout to a lot of people. So we had a lot of clients coming in and referrals, and people we didn't even know saying, would you look at my CalPERS policy? They've had massive rate increases. They'll continue to have rate increases. But a couple concerns that I always have, it's like, listen, having something is better than having nothing. If you paid a lot of those benefits, had some type of inflation protection that's grown. So $100 they started 20 years ago is now worth maybe $300 or $275. So it's important not to just a knee-jerk reaction is, oh, I'm not going to keep this any longer. You need to look at it. They were actually offering buyout options or you could look at a couple ladies I met with. I said, why don't you take the inflation, reduce the inflation, and take okay, I've got $275 a day right now. It's not going to grow anymore, but I'm not going to get any more, significant rate increases. So you need to look at those options instead of just saying, I'm upset and I am going to cash it in. And the interesting thing about CalPERS isn't regulated by the Department of Insurance. So if the four
Interesting.
of us were on the board here, we could simply decide if we needed a rate increase, right, Rick, that we're going to have this rate increase, and we all agreed and it's passed, and therefore we're having a rate increase. And I just think you have to look at it really good before you decide to cash something in, especially if you've had it for 20 years.
And I think that, goes back to what we've said about the annuities, the life insurance, long-term care. Let's see what you have and see if we can improve on it. Let's don't just throw it out because we're upset.
Right.
And
Right.
I agree with Jim, it's look at it, assess it, then make good decisions from now going forward.
Perfect. Next up, I've watched both your Medicare presentation and long-term care presentation. Which one covers me at Ardenwood? I have Part A of Medicare only. If I stay there for a prolonged period, which policy would I use? I want to understand so I'm not a burden to anyone.
Right.
So Medicare approved stay is different than long-term care. I know we're going to talk Medicare next week, and Leslie does a better job than anybody I know at explaining the differences, because that's a really important distinction. If you were there long-term, that's normally where the long-term care policy would definitely kick in. And short-term, it may be Medicare, it may be long-term care. And I think that's something we let Leslie talk about next week for sure.
Right, John, but they would be covered in Part A for sure if they come into
exactly.
Ardenwood. So
Right, we're Medicare Part A. Actually, Leslie will be away next week, but we've got Nancy Sedan, our Director of Finance.
Okay.
So
Nancy knows
we're all set. Yeah.
That's
Leslie's going to be with her grandkids, which is just great.
Okay.
So, okay. Next question. I'm not opposed to looking at options for long-term care. I'm 67 and I live in Idaho. I am widowed. No adult children close by. I live in a small town and worry about who would take care of me if I ever need it. Which one of these plans you presented would work best for someone like me? I like the idea of my children getting the money tax-free. They live too far away to take care of me.
Okay.
So we have this conversation a lot when we talk, especially with Christian Scientists. This would be important where what's your goal for long-term care? Is it to stay at a Christian Science facility? Is that something that is realistic, or are you thinking you're more going to need care at home? And so we would definitely want to have that conversation of where you see care happening, or what you would like to have happen if you need care, in order to kind of see what type of a policy would work best.
Rick, you know that Idaho area pretty well, don't you?
I know that Idaho, and there are a lot of remote areas.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's one thing I would put into that to add to Katie is, if your kids aren't close, who is going to help make those decisions for you? So when you start talking your health directives and your overall legacy planning, getting your trust and will and all that in place, it's not only how it's getting paid, but who's going to be there to help you. And if the kids are away, if you're in a more remote area, somebody's got to be there to help make those decisions for you. You can't do it anymore. Who's that going to be? And there again, it's one, if the kids aren't close, you're probably going to have to rely on some friends, maybe for those kinds of decisions to help. So it really is one, you're going to have to put some thought behind it. So it is a two-part. How do we pay for it, but who's there to help?
Right.
And I mean, we see a lot of time, unfortunately, when you're in that situation where you're relying on friends or maybe a sibling to be the one that helps out, a lot of times they're similar age, so they're needing care around the same time you are. So that makes that situation a lot harder, unfortunately.
I've seen so many situations, and we had a family friend that moved up here actually because he was aging, he was in his 80s, and his wife had passed. And he's like, well, if I need care, I kept saying, if you need care, what's going to happen? So he had a couple buddies he'd been with since college, right? And they were talking. He says, well, if something happens to me, or you guys help out? And they're like, oh no, that's what your family's for, right? They flat out told him that's what your family's for. So we convinced him to move up here so he'd be close to us, because we were kind of his family, right?
Mhm.
So that's exactly what happens. Sometimes friends are like, I really want to help, but where's your family, Rick?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
Sometimes they're not easy answers. I mean,
No,
there's
I know.
sometimes
Right.
it takes a little bit to get to the answer you're most comfortable with,
Right.
but it really, at the end of the day, who do you want making decisions?
Yeah.
You or somebody else? Because if you don't make them, a judge will,
Right.
and they'll give you care maybe that you didn't want.
Right. That's
So,
or the less costly care that someone can possibly find, right?
And
Or-
I know we didn't talk about the advanced healthcare directive. I know, John, that's something we normally talk about, and we didn't talk
Absolutely.
about that on Tuesday, being very, very important.
right.
very, very important. We'll talk about that next week too with the Medicare presentation, but getting advanced healthcare directive is essential. We have it on our website, ardenwood.org. You can find it there. And this discussion is so important because you can feel the burden in that question. And by taking a little time now and having a plan, creating this, talking it through, working with either one of you or someone else, lifts that burden so that you're happier and feel good about you'll be getting the care if you need care, not expecting that you need care, certainly. But if it were that to happen, there's a plan in place. What a relief that is.
Right. It is. Yeah.
That's great.
A relief factor. Yeah.
Sleep factor.
Yeah.
for
Sleep
sure.
factor. Yes.
Yeah, just you're not a burden to anyone or yourself because that's a burden on you. Yeah, right. Okay, we've got two more questions. If anyone in our audience wants to think of a question, now would be a great time to type it in there at the bottom of your screen. Got two left here. Next up, my husband and I have thought about who would take care of us if something happens in the future. We are committed to take care of each other, but want to be prudent with our monies. Are these insurance plans guaranteed? We don't want to risk losing any of our money. Would we be better would we be better served by keeping a set amount in a CD? Would you mind going over the differences between some type of policy and keeping money in a separate account that is secure and guaranteed? A lot wrapped in there.
Yeah, that's a long one. Rick, do you want to tackle that?
yeah, I think that one really hits with a lot of what we've talked about. A lot of these, I would say most of these policies, when we look at them, are guaranteed.
Right. Yes.
And you always want to look at what's guaranteed, what's not. And when you're looking at long-term care, I like guarantees. I like to know that money's going to be there versus a CD. I mean, if you look at a CD, and let me just use a very simple example. If I put $1 in a CD and I need care, how much is there? $1. It's not going to grow. It might beat inflation, in today's world, probably won't. Or I can put that money into a long-term care policy and my dollar is now $3 guaranteed.
Yep.
So if I can get $3 versus $1, I'm better off. There again, is it guaranteed or not? And most of these policies have that guaranteed benefit to them.
Yeah.
When I look at life insurance has both a guaranteed and non-guaranteed factor to most policies. So we just want to look at both. There, and it's one, the rest of that question was, yes, you're going to take care of each other. And as couples, honestly, that's what I would expect. Whoever needs care first, the well spouse will be there to care and take care of that person. The bigger question is, who takes care of the surviving spouse?
Right.
And that's the bigger question. Is it going to fall on the burden? Is that going to the kids? Friends, family, whoever, or are you going to prepare for it? Prepare for who's going to do it and how you're going to pay for it. So it really comes into there again, it's planning. Sometimes planning, I find planning for a lot of people, it can be enjoyable. It can also, open up wounds and stuff that you didn't know were there. And some people just don't want to talk about mortality.
Yeah, right.
You look at retirement. I talk to people and I said, if you're planning for, if you're 30 years old and planning for retirement, what do you picture? Well, you picture golfing, friends, family, beach, travel.
Vacations.
None of it involves being in a bed because of long-term care needs, health needs. And so sometimes it's things that we're taking ourselves outside of the box, thinking about what if.
Right.
And so if we can plan for those what ifs the best way possible, just know it might change. You know, people that you thought were going to be there to take care of you may not be. So you may have to look at that and amend it. I do say, as you put your documents together, at least once a year, review it. Does it need to be updated, changed, improved? You know, it's an ongoing planning process, not a set and forget.
Right.
The other thing too that I find that people overlook is the physical side of providing the care.
Yeah.
So my husband's grandmother went through and she needed long-term care. She needed care, and her husband is still alive to this day. And so he was the one providing care. But the problem was, as she physically needed help out of a bed, into a chair, out of a chair, he couldn't do that by himself. So my father-in-law actually ended up moving in with them for 3 months. And so he was there because he had to help provide the actual physical care, because my grandfather-in-law couldn't do that himself. He could not physically lift her when that, you know, when it's dead weight like that, it's really hard. And so luckily my father-in-law is retired, because otherwise they would have gone through a significant amount of money having someone there. And she needed help even in the middle of the night as well. And so that would have been 24-hour care. That gets extremely expensive, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, we just went through it with my wife's stepdad. He needed care. You know, my wife's mom was definitely there to help take care of him, but she couldn't get him in and out of bed, in and out of the wheelchair. Somebody had to go over there every day, you know, at least twice a day, to take care of that for her.
Yeah.
But what I also found was she was the one providing the care, and her health suffered from it.
That's a great point, Rick. You know, statistically, most caregivers, right, get sicker than the person they're caring for. I mean, it's really, it's scary, but people do it out of love. They wear themselves down. I could give you 50 examples of people who had an illness and it came back, right? That disease came back because they were so stressed about taking care of their loved one. They promised them they wouldn't move them out of the home, and, you know, financially became a burden, and physically became a burden. It was just an emotional nightmare for them. And that disease, that came back, unfortunately. So I do see that. Yeah.
Well, and the other one I see is you hit it as the financial burden. You know, and I see this a lot. All of the money gets funneled to the spouse that needs the help first.
Right.
And there's no money left for the second spouse to survive on.
Yeah.
You know, their standard of living goes down.
Right.
Yeah. We just really want to have a plan. It's good to think these things through in terms of how would this play out and what is my choice of care exactly. Last up, and if anyone would like to submit one, now is the time. After watching these presentations, I have a concern about a will versus a trust. I do have a will, but no trust. I have 2 adult children and want to make sure they get my 2 homes, my IRA, and my bank accounts. Is the trust something I really need?
I think a trust is something that should be considered. What I like about a trust is it makes things move much smoother, you know, when death occurs, or when there's a lack of mental capacity. When you have a will, the only way you move those houses with a will is through probate. So after you pass away, the kids have to go to court, file the probate. The will gets probated in the court, and depending on what state you're in, can either be an okay process to an absolute burden. If you're in California, you do not go to probate court. The fees, the cost, the time, it will eat up what you thought the kids were going to get.
Wow. Okay.
And so it's one where my preference is always a trust. Depending on the state, it may not be as big of a burden. but we want to look and see what's going to be the best and easiest to handle. And I can tell you if those two homes are in two different states, now it's two probates. You probate the state that the real estate is held in. The bank account and the IRAs, those can pass by the beneficiary designation. You can actually in your bank account put a beneficiary on those accounts, so it doesn't have to be part of the trust, doesn't go as part of the will or probate. It just, when death occurs, you file a death certificate and the beneficiary will get that account. So it really comes back to we want to be efficient both now and when things happen. And most of the time a trust will do that in a more efficient manner than a will does.
Great. Thank you, Rick. Well, thank you. There's no other questions. And we're just about at the top of the hour. So thank you, Jim, Katie, and Rick. Truly. As I said last week or earlier this week, I learned something new every time you guys talk about this topic. And that reminds me to tell you that you can watch a replay of all of our webinars, including this one, on our website, ardenwood.org. This presentation will be available in a day or two. So please be in touch with us with any questions. Our contact information will appear at the end of this presentation. Also, we have several upcoming events to tell you about. Next week, as earlier mentioned, we have 2 webinars on Medicare for Christian Scientists on Tuesday, the 11th, and Thursday, the 13th at 4 p.m., same time. Jim and Katie have several changes to tell you about, and some are favorable to Christian Scientists coming up in 2023. Please tell your friends about these webinars and to register on our website. In November, our last estate planning workshops will be on November 1st and November 3rd. And a Medicare Q&A will be on November 10th. Also in November, we invite you to join us for an online Bible presentation on the law that reveals health, given by Evan McDonald, a Bible scholar, on Sunday, November 5th. Evan's Bible research will inspire new views of a timeless truth. In December, our annual Christmas celebration is Sunday afternoon, December 4th. We hope you, your family, and friends will join us online. It's going to be a lot of fun this year. You can find details and register for all our online events on our website, ardenwood.org. Thank you again for joining us today, and goodbye for now.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.